Welcome to
Look, Mum, no hands.
We have an amazing show today, exploring those scary choices life presents through the lived experience of our guests.
Many of you will recognise that incessant whisper in your ear, tugging you to change your life, squaring up for the big jump.
Whether it's career, life, family or love, there's that saying, if you're unwilling to be a foolish beginner, you will never improve.
Or as I say, a life lived in fear is only half a life.
Welcome to Look Mum, No Hands. Today we're delighted to be joined by Leighton James House, a well-known composer, and Shaun McKenna, who calls himself variously a playwright, a screenwriter, a bookwriter, and a lyricist. Is that right, gentlemen?
That's right. Yeah.
Did I miss anything out for you, Leighton?
No. I'm not, as I said to someone just a moment ago, I'm the only person I haven't heard of in the musical that we've just written. So, yeah, I'll go with composer.
He's way too modest.
You have to say that with confidence. So what are you?
I'm a composer of musicals.
Still a bit hesitant.
Yeah,
And all round excellent.
As you can tell, Sarah is also with us, butting in at the wrong moment as usual. And in fact, there's a continuation of an interview we did with Simon Spencer a few weeks back, who was very much the driving force behind Are You As Nervous As I Am, a brand new musical which was featured at the Greenwich Theatre and is still running, I think, until the 24th.
That's right. We run till Sunday. Today is obviously, maybe this is going out a little bit later, but we're on till Sunday the 20... Did you just say it right, 4th?
Yeah.
I think so.
And then hopes of touring next year.
Yeah,
Correct.
And I think, to be fair to you, gentlemen, Sarah and I are not totally from your world, and so Simon introduced us to the fact that you were very much part of the team. And I think we came away from the whole exercise thinking, wow, there's lots of divisions of the creative contribution in the making of a musical.
Oh God, yes.
And we started thinking, well, how do these people all get along with each other?
Well, that's always an issue. I mean, there's Simon's wearing two hats. He's wearing the bookwriter hat and the producer hat. So when you say in my introduction I'm a bookwriter, I mean specifically for musicals.
Yes.
I have written a couple of books.
No, it's a term of art.
It's
isn't it,
a term of art.
And just to help our listeners, it's the person that fills in the stuff between the songs.
Absolutely. It's
structures the whole...
it's the person who puts up the scaffolding and hopefully writes the most minimal book. He's the person who creates the setting for the jewels.
Yeah.
But without the setting for the jewels working, it'll just look like a pile of stones. It's a huge... I've written a lot of books and musicals. It's a hugely underrated job. And if there's a problem with a musical, it's always the book writer who gets blamed.
Yes.
Even whatever
and rarely
the truth
complimented if it goes well.
If it goes well, honestly, you shouldn't be complimented because nobody shouldn't notice what you've done.
Right.
If you look at West Side Story, nobody thinks about Arthur Lawrence, who wrote the book for Gypsy as well. These are the great musicals.
Are book writers normally the last child in the family, in the birth order?
They're the middle one that nobody notices. They don't get all the praise the young one does, and they don't have to fight the battles like the older one does.
In this series, we tend to sort of look at birth order and all sorts of other factors that dictate what you become in life.
Fair enough.
We find that most of us run on tram lines, actually, without realising it.
Sure.
Well, okay, so that covers the book writer, but you're also obviously doing many other roles.
Yeah, I write for radio. I haven't done TV for ages because I can't get arrested on TV at the moment. I'm deeply unfashionable. But I do a lot of radio. I have a radio series about Eleanor of Aquitaine out, just finished actually, on Radio 4, available on BBC Sounds. And I've written book and lyrics for 5 West End shows, I think. couple in New York, a couple in Europe, and I write proper plays as well.
Right.
And they're all different. Writing a play and writing a musical are completely different things.
Leighton, I want to just make sure you have a chance to say something.
Sorry.
I am so comfortable listening to Shaun talk.
No. I mean,
yourselves.
we're going to keep going. You know, obviously we rarely interview two people together, so this is somewhat of a novelty. But I mean, you from the little I've read, deliberately messed up your education so that you only had one thing you could do in life. Is that a fair comment?
That's you picked that one line up from something I said on Twitter not too long ago. I wanted to be an actor. I was doing A-levels in Richard Jewish College in Taunton, where I grew up, and my drama teacher loved me, and my music teacher didn't. We would butt heads quite a lot. We were doing a production of the Caucasian Chalk Circle, and we'd hired in, my drama teacher hired in, the score that had been used in a National Theatre production some time ago. It didn't arrive. It was times of post when you had to have stuff sent. And this was a big old score. Didn't arrive. And I sat down at the piano because I could play a bit. And I said, I can write this. I stepped out of being in the show.
Right.
Was in Caucasian Chalk Circle, you've got narrators. And it was a big role, but I said, no, I'll write it. And I wrote about a third of it, and it was good. And it was very strange. I was just feeling really comfortable with not easy text. And then the score arrived, and my music teacher said at that moment, stop doing what we're doing with him. It's here, let's carry on. And my drama teacher stood up for me, Hilary Jones, and she said, no, we're going to do it. And then when you got the two things together, the third-ish that I'd done, and then the score by someone, I think it was an amazing score, a female composer, I've forgotten the name, the two matched. And then I went, okay, this is what I can do, that I think I can do better than anyone else here in my year at Hewish. And that's when I became a composer, by giving up my dream of being a performer. And that was 27 years ago or something.
Oh. Right. That's actually really interesting because from a lot of people we've interviewed, we found that although they might have had some idea of exactly what they wanted to do, that when they moved maybe from acting to production or directing, you know, that was actually their métier. So they were still very much in the same world, but maybe one stage removed from the original thought that they might have had.
I think people fancy the idea of being an actor. I was the same. I started off, I was an actor for 6 or 7 years, ended up doing lots and lots of children's theatre, and by the time I'd finished going, oh, hello everybody, how are you? I was unfit to do Chekhov, really. But having been a writer, having been an actor, has made me so much better as a writer because I understand how an actor approaches it. And I think it's probably the same for you, Leighton, isn't it?
I think so. I did then perform a little bit, but only at the college level. And then I wrote differently, I think, for people because I had been doing it. And I think I've always stuck with that because I'm quite confident in singing. Not well, as my mum always reminded me, but... sorry. Become the company manager, become the this and that, learn it from the bottom up, and I think I got to do that, and Shaun just said the same.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing yesterday. I was working at an event for London Cocktail Week, and we were the immersive actors there, bringing people in and taking them through the experience. But then there was also the hospitality staff, and seeing how people, even though I was there as an actor, like all good actors, I've worked in hospitality, and seeing the managers try and run their bar and service, I was like, this is really quite like a failure. It was all wrong. And I thought maybe these are people who've graduated and managed to get a good job, but not done the base work of learning every role that hospitality involves. And I'm like, well, if you don't know what's going on beneath management, how are you going to manage? So.
Absolutely. Very quick story. I, in COVID times, fell into a job, and I must tell this story. Big company called Collinson's, who I worked for nearly 2 years, were the first people to set up testing in airports, commercial testing to get people back on the planes. And they asked 20 actors and creative people to come in and improvise the process. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make the queues? This was at Heathrow Terminal 5 and Terminal 2. How are we going to do this? A year and a half later, half of those actors were managers of each site. London Heathrow, Gatwick, London City, Manchester. What am I saying? I'm saying these incredible people who are great actors, some who've had Olivier nominations, I won't name names, were then running these things because they were good at it. And this skill set that they never knew they had. And these people from a big corporation, when these people have talents outside of, which made me think of what you're just saying, is creatives are very good when you take them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, they're just always willing to
And
let
they-
go of the handlebars
Always,
and
yeah.
go with it.
And also because we have to do loads and loads of different amazing, extraordinary and peculiar things to make a living.
Yes. So what have you done before you were doing the job you're doing now? Do you remember your first job?
God, my first job was in an insurance office when I was 16. Before I went to university, when I was an actor, my worst job was actually in Hatton Garden, and they employed actors through the back pages of the stage to come and pretend to be customers, because they figured in this jewellery shop that if they saw lots of people in there, more people would come in and buy you jewellery from them. Of course, we had to sit and talk to the salespeople. The salespeople hated it because we were all wasting our time.
Right.
But they were paying, I don't know, whatever it was in those days, 20 quid a day, and it was paying the rent. It was putting food on the table. That wasn't quite the worst job ever. Was delivering frozen chickens, and I only managed it for a day. Because I got
Because they didn't fit through the letterbox. Or
A, because I wasn't strong enough, because trays of frozen chickens are really heavy. And B, I had to start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. And then at the end of the day, I got locked inside the back of the refrigerated van and was banging on the doors in Brighton saying, let me out, let me out, let me out. And I was so traumatised I couldn't go back. But I embarrassingly had to go back and ask for the money I'd earned that day because I needed it.
So your room 101 is being locked up in a freezer department with some chickens.
With some frozen chickens, yeah.
Well, now we know. What's
And
yours?
whenever things go badly, I have a friend, whenever I say, I'm not going to do this, I hate this job, I'm not going to work for these people, I have a friend who just taps the side of her nose and says, frozen chickens, Shaun, frozen chickens.
I had to wear a bow tie and a white shirt and a short sleeve white shirt in Safeways before it became Morrison's, and I was the trolley boy in a bow tie, in the car park, in the sun or the rain or the snow or whatever, getting the trolleys that the people left at the far side of the car park in Taunton. Very posh looking trolley collector.
Yeah, that is something with a bow tie.
I mean, it's good to do lots of weird jobs, isn't it? I mean, I trained as a lawyer. I do mergers and acquisitions. I'm treated quite seriously. But I did have a job as an ice cream van boy in my school, in university holidays. I worked for a company called Notariani in Pinner. Lovely Italians who did 6 months during the summer. Then bought large Daimler double sixes, those huge limousines, drove them to Italy where they were sold as hearses or something. They had another business. And it was. I actually got my first traffic fine for being in Regent's Park, I think. I had a whole queue of Japanese tourists, and I wasn't allowed to sell in the park this unnoticed. And I used my law to get off, actually. But yeah, it's really good to just try your hand at so many different things. And I did have a fight with a Mr. Whippy, actually, on an industrial estate as well.
It's amazing, I think, how all these things, it's like, as the kind of, oh God, I'm going to get poetic. All the little streams and rivulets of things that you do, early experience, all kind of eventually feeds into the kind of broader river of your life as you go through. Nothing's ever wasted. I think especially if you're in the creative industries, because you have, experience of a weird and wacky range of things.
Yeah. Do you carry a lot of unfinished business around in your heads, which sometimes finds an application in an unusual way? You're looking for inspiration, you need to do some creative thinking, and then you summon something from your past which has been just lying dormant.
I think a little bit. I think for me it's more like something comes along or something comes up or there's a project that gives me a hook and I kind of go, oh, I can hang this on that hook, and yes, then it is some bit of your past. And also as a writer, I think all kinds of I've never ever consciously put anybody I know into anything I've written, but a lot of people have recognised things they've said to me, which I don't remember them saying to me, because it's just lodged in there somewhere, and the hook has appeared, and I've thought, oh, that'll hang on there nicely.
I mean, I'm supposed to be creative in the financial services sense, which is maybe not that creative, but one of my clients said to me, Daniel, you're like a guy that walks around with a bag of bits, jumble, and that when anyone mentions something, one of them will fit with your bag of bits, which isn't indexed. It's not properly catalogued, but you have it in your weird functioning brain, and maybe we all have that.
But I wish I had a bag of bits to do with financial services. I really do.
Well, look, one of the things I wanted to understand is the collaboration between people that have to produce one entity that makes sense to the audience, and particularly when you fragment, the words from the music, from the bit that connects it, the book writer, as we're calling it. What's the relationship that engenders?
Well, in terms of working with a composer, it kind of depends on the composer, and I've worked with 3 or 4 different ones. Leighton's my favourite, obviously, because he's sitting next to me. And sometimes I can write the lyrics first and just give them the lyrics, and sometimes the composer writes the tune first and gives me the tune, and sometimes it's a back and forth. And if it's a plot-driven song, it's usually easiest to write the lyrics first and give it to the composer. And in this show, and in fact our next show, which is called Trouser Bar, which is quite unlike anything anybody's ever seen, I think. It was 50-50, wasn't it?
Yeah, we spoke about this not that long ago. The first thing we worked on, I think it was a lot of music first, because I'd written that part of it first. And then this one and other songs we'd written, I would say it became 50-50, which isn't the norm. Elton John cannot write a note of music, he says, unless he has the lyrics in front of him. And Shaun and I can do either. So Shaun inspires me often, and he's right with the more plot-driven, wordy things, and then I will present back at him what I think is a great big love ballad or something, and he will do his magic on it. But we're very equal in our
Do you need to be physically together to do that? Or
no, we never write together.
Never.
So how would you send each other your bits and pieces of?
In the olden days, a fax.
Fax.
Yeah,
Back in 2000 or 1999, when we started work on a Terry Pratchett musical, it was a fax. And here's the very sad thing: fax paper degrades. So in my bottom drawer, I have a lot of white paper with tiny titles. I can just get a bit.
Which
it's
could have
gone.
sold for thousands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, one of the collaborations I love is I've always loved Elvis Costello, and he obviously did a famous album with Burt Bacharach called "Painted from Memory," and I heard an interview about how that was done, and apparently Elvis Costello would send things which he put on the voice message, because it was before email and everything, and he would send Burt Bacharach, sing him something, and leave it as a voice message because of the time difference. So he would pick it up, on his answer phone. That's what I mean by voice message, answer phone, and then respond overnight or something.
Phones have made it so. Smartphones have made it so much easier. You used to have a little cassette dictaphone thing, and you'd sing into it or something. Nowadays, Leighton will send me a tune, and I'll set the tune, and then I'll play the tune through the desktop, just record it and record myself singing it back. These will never see the light of day, I have to say, because it's not a pretty sound. But that's made life, so you can just see how the lyrics fit.
We had a little bit of experience of this ourselves. Funny enough, the introduction to our podcast, I don't know if you've listened to it, it's the music from Night on a Bare Mountain by Mussorgsky, with some words that we created, and we actually went into a studio and did the work, what do you call it? Talk over?
I think it'll be synchronization, like you do in adverts, where you put the music to the piece, but yeah, we've got the words, and it was pretty much one take wonder, wasn't
was
it,
good.
Daniel?
It was an absolute one-take wonder, and I suddenly thought, yes, the words were good, but with the music, and the music was good. I love the music. It's from that sort of macabre end of the market, Night on a Bare Mountain, there's a whole series of pieces that sort of fit into that.
Yeah.
And we just put it together, and it was miraculous, and so it made it so much better. And suddenly I saw what I think you're doing, which is, and you must have something in your head that allows you to visualize the music and the words together.
I don't read music. I'm 44, and as a young kid, my parents gave me a Yamaha keyboard school, which was actually organs with pedals and all these things, and they sent me for years to learn. And I did my first exam, and I realised, however hard I try, and have tried since, you look at the dots on the white piece of paper, I can't do it. It's maths, is what it is to me. And my brain doesn't work that way. So I think that pushed me to become a composer, because I have to remember everything. I don't really even write it down. I do now record stuff because I can, but in the early days, and still, pretty much, if I sit at the piano after a few practices, hey Shaun, it's all still there. So what's the point of saying that? It's in that's my skill. So I used to be able to play EastEnders on the piano. My mum was delighted. I used to be able to pick up a TV theme, Van der Valk, eye level, and just play it. And that's, I think, is why I now know how to create something new. And my theory is, if I can remember it, it must be memorable. Or in the olden days, it used to be someone else's tune. I used to get a bit upset, but everything is someone else's tune somewhere.
Yeah. Speaking of tunes, in your latest production, Are You As Nervous As I Am? There's, a lot of the music throughout, I was like, oh, this is lovely, it's lovely. I'm singing along, and then is it towards somewhere in the second act, the sisters are together singing a song, and it's just so raw and deep and just so emotional. How are you tapping into that? The whole show's it's this very sad, dark story with optimism and hope and love and connectivity. But there are places where you think, okay, these girls have gone through a lot. They've ended up together again. How have you...
There are two kinds of songs in the show. There's a convention in the show that was Simon's idea, that the songs start as songs that are being sung in the room, and then we go off in the middle into the internal thoughts, and then we come back to the room at the end. So the overall song that is supposedly the song being sung has to relate to the theme in some way before you go there. We also have a thing in the show whereby, because we go from 1945 to 1975, so there's a whole variety, and she's a singing star, so we're kind of pastiching styles from the show at the same time. But so some of it is like lyrics that would have been written in 1963 for a song Doris Day was singing on this theme, and then some of it is character stuff and stuff where you can actually explore emotions. And how do you compose that differently? I don't know.
Oh, you've asked me about the one song. It's called Too Long, and it's about their comings back together. And I'm going to be honest, that was a song that didn't get used in another show, the majority of it. And it was was also written for two females.
And we're back to the bag of bits, aren't we?
And that was what I was thinking, my bottom drawer, and then the Lost Facts paper lyrics. I so rarely do that. I think one a show, and that's the one that you picked up on, but actually was written for something else with a different collaborator at that time as well, probably about 20 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, if my memory fails me. I apologise, but a long time ago.
Okay.
But with the others, there's a song in the middle of Act 2, which I'm really proud of, called What the Hell Is It For?, where she's...
Oh, yes.
She's drunk, she's broken, and basically it's like a Shirley Bassey number from circa 1973.
That's exactly what I got from it.
And
Shirley.
I wrote it overnight, he'd done the tune. We'd gone down to Somerset to stay with a friend of his, and we were trying to write 3 new songs over this weekend, weren't we? Because we're quite quick. And he finished the tune. I said, okay, I'm taking this to bed with me. Went to bed and just wrote this song. And I did my whole, like, I'm sitting up in bed in this room in Somerset being Shirley Bassey, you know, I who have nothing, all that thing, and came up with something that Shirley would have sung in those days. And it's one of the best songs we've ever written.
It is. We were sat in this really grand, beautiful room in the house that we were staying at. It's called the Oak Room, with this respectfully dreadful baby grand. When I said to her, it's so heavy and the room is so cold, playing it hurts. And I think that sometimes brings something out in me. And Shaun and Simon were talking, and one said to the other, what the hell is it for? And I think it was you too, Simon. And I was sat at the piano, and they were down the other end of this room. And I went on my phone, and I typed in song, what the hell is it for? Doesn't exist. And this sounds so cliche, but it's true. And they were chatting, and I wrote that to that lyric that Shaun had said, and then had to stop them, which I don't do, and it sounds contrived, but it wasn't. And that afternoon became that. Shaun went to bed. The next morning, it was written. Almost now the same song. That was our bestest collaborative moment,
and it was one of the
so
quickest
far.
ones because it took like 2.5, 3 hours, something like
Now, you
that.
were physically together, obviously, down at this.
And that was your other point. That's one of the so few times that we've done it.
Right, but it was
in the
different.
same room.
But because he'll noodle away on the piano, and I can't write if there's noise, so I will go away somewhere quiet and write it, and then come back and play around the piano. We've done it a couple of times. He's borrowed a nice converted barn in Sussex off a friend.
Does that increase the rate at which you interact if you're physically together? So that you can go to your quiet room, reflect, and come back, and you can work on it in an iterative sense, I guess. Is that the word? So that you can make something happen faster.
Yes, we set ourselves a deadline. We then did something else for a film idea, and we had to write 4 songs for it, and it was similar. The trouble is, I work late, and Shaun has much more discipline and tends to work earlier. So I'll have a drink, and then I'll start creating, and then present Shaun with things and ideas, and then he'll come back. So that kind of works for us.
So
we meet in the middle and have lunch.
I mean, I did a little bit of homework because the whole subject wasn't that familiar to me. I mean, there seem to be, there have been some very famous collaborations. Gilbert and Sullivan, as you mentioned, Bernie Taupin and Elton John, but Bacharach and Hal David, Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim and so forth. Yeah, there have also been people who tried to do it all themselves, like
Not many. Not many. Cole Porter never wrote the book.
Okay.
He did book and lyric. He did something. There are very few. The guy who wrote The Music Man, whose name immediately escapes me, did book, music, and lyrics. Generally speaking, it's not a set of skills that many people have to do all 3 of them well.
Right. That was something that I wanted to understand, but particularly given that you have to collaborate, does it get tense? Do you want to smash something in order to clear the air if you've had a bit of a creative disagreement, or how do you manage relations in that?
I'm not going to say it's all sweetness and light, because I get passionate and loud and emphatic sometimes, don't I?
He does.
Yes.
But I tend to go very, very quiet if I'm uncomfortable. But Shaun and I have never creatively fallen out.
Never.
It's always been, unfortunately, production issues or other people's interference that perhaps riles us up, depending on which side we feel we're on. But as a writing team, I don't think...
We've never fallen out.
And I like all the lyrics of Shaun's that sadly sometimes people disagree with and get changed. So I'm a big fan of leaving Shaun to do what he knows how to do best.
We've had a couple of rows on the phone, but generally not about the songs. We're not... There's a big myth about people who work in the theatre, which I'm sure you'll Almost everybody is really nice, really collaborative, really friendly, and actually the work is what matters. All this stuff about egos and divas and people throwing their toys out of the pram and stalking off and all that kind of thing is kind of what TV and film writers write about theatre people. It's not really that.
But it's actually the TV and film people who are like that.
It really is. It really is.
I mean, do you think that the ultimate musical would be about the creation of a musical? The process.
Well, there are a couple.
We have written our new show is about the creation. Can I tell him?
Yeah.
Our new show, which is called Trouser Bar at the moment, because that was the title of the film, is about the long-standing creation of a film script for a gay porn movie.
Oh.
It's based on truth. That was written by somebody incredibly famous who then, after his death, wasn't allowed to be named. And I never thought I was going to make a musical, but Leighton just knew this was going to make a show. And I went, well, all this is going to be is like 5 or 6 camp songs put together, funny songs. But we put it together and it's turned into something really very passionate and kind of, it says something, and it's about freedom and liberty and all those things in a way that I had no idea. And it has a kind of emotional depth that came upon me completely unexpectedly.
Can I mention your private world slightly or not?
You can.
Okay. Well, Shaun recently has had a relationship with a gentleman, and it was around this same time, having not had a relationship with a gentleman before, being married to a lady before, a wonderful woman, and then we wrote this story, and you were talking about hanging things and finding it, and it was this silly little story, and then Shaun, I don't know, you so connected with it, and then we wrote this love story to homosexuality back in a time when you couldn't be, or it starts in America and then it comes here, and the 40, 50-year gap of still, and a state of a well-known famous actor not allowing that part to be discussed.
No, that was very much a Look Mum No Hands kind of show.
Yeah.
Actually, the whole idea.
I was actually going to turn it to her, because you mentioned at the beginning that you felt that you had many Look Mum No Hands moments in your career, by which we...
Not just career, in my life. I'm a jumper. I jump into things
Right.
with both feet, wholeheartedly, and sometimes you jump into mud, or sometimes you jump into boiling water and you have to jump out again.
I feel you're jumping in bottom first then. You're bombing in, you're tucking in and just fully...
I do.
Wow, letting everything just explode everywhere.
I kind of do.
Right.
I have complete faith that the universe will hold me up and rescue me, and it always does.
Do you remember your first big jump? Or one that holds in your memory?
My first big jump actually probably was, apart from all the stuff about wanting to be an actor and all that, started. My first big jump was actually my wife. It was when I met my wife. I was very sexually confused as a young man, and then I met this amazing woman and fell in love very hard. And I'd had this idea, I was 27, I'd had this idea that by the time, from a child, that when I was 28, my image of myself as 28 was like having a wife and 2 kids and a house and a dog. And I turned 27, I thought, well, that's never going to happen. And then I met this amazing woman who was 15 years older than me, who had 2 children. We got the dog a bit later, and she had a house. And within 6 weeks, I asked her to marry me. Wow. We got married. We were really happy. By the time I was 28, we'd inherited somebody's dog from a divorce. I had a wife, 2 children, 2 stepchildren, a dog, and a house. And there was never any question. It was a kind of jump in, and that's it forever. And I've made a vow, and I'm never going to cheat, and all those kinds of things. And then she died in 2014, and for 4.5 years, I didn't even think about dating anybody else, because it would have still felt like cheating. It would have felt like being unfaithful. And then I reconnected on Facebook with a guy I was at university with who I'd had a sort of fling with. And we arranged to meet for a drink. And on the run up to meeting him, I thought, I wonder what he looks like these days. I wonder if there might still be a frisson. I wonder if anything might happen. And we had a very lovely evening. Nothing happened. And I got home and thought, I'm really disappointed that nothing happened.
Oh.
So I think I better do something about this. I just started dating women again, and nothing had gone well there. And I thought, well, I'll have to go on Grindr then. She was the only thing I knew. I'd never used a dating app or anything. I went on Grindr and began a new adventure and was very scared and thought at my age, because I was, 61 or something? No, I thought nobody would ever, nobody I fancied would ever fancy me. And that certainly proved not to be the case.
Oh, that's true.
And and now I've got
Several boyfriends.
No, I have a boyfriend who's moved in, who's half my age, and the handsomest man I've ever seen, and I am happily out as a gay man. And people then say, "Oh, well, you must have been living a lie all those years." No, I absolutely wasn't. But I was a happily married straight man for 30 years. Yeah. A bit camp, probably. People always. The thing that really annoyed me was that I used to be able to say, "I'm living proof that straight men can write musicals," and now, of course, that doesn't apply. And then the first ever musical I wrote was we were really broke, and my stepdaughter was doing stage management at Lavender and was on secondment in Ipswich, doing a show with Trevor Nunn as ASM, and we went up to see it, and it was terrible. And driving back to Brighton, where we lived, I could write a better musical than that, and a week later, an ad appeared in the stage looking for a lyricist, and it looked like a proper ad. It wasn't a proper ad. It was two 23-year-olds, straight out of drama school wanting a collaborator. So I just lied and pretended that I'd written lyrics before, and I was already writing plays by that point. Pretended that I'd written lyrics before, and I was working at a radio station, so I was able to record some demos, did all that, sent it all in. Eventually they chose me, and within 3 months I was studying with Stephen Sondheim. I'm in the room with Sondheim. And the first lyrics I ever wrote, because my composer at the time was on a course with Sondheim, and I wasn't on the whole course, but I went up for 2 or 3 days. And the first lyrics I ever wrote get put in front of Stephen Sondheim, and he ripped them to shreds, and I walked out of the room in a very nice way. I walked out of the room feeling about 3 inches tall, and one of the other guys said, "God, he really liked you. You got away with that really easily, really lightly." So, when you jump, things happen. Yeah. It creates the opportunity for stuff to come into your life.
Have there been things that you've purposely avoided because you're like, well, no, because I'm sure that if I just stay focused on what I've got my eyes set on, it will happen? Or do you still accept those kind of diversions to come in?
No, I'm terrible. I'm really easily distracted, and I throw mud at the wall, and whatever sticks. That's my kind of approach to life. The only thing, I have no regrets at all, apart from in the last financial crash when with Fannie Mae and all those things, whatever they were called, we got into deep debt, and we sold the house to try and get out of it. And had we managed to keep the house, I'd have been in a far better financial position than I am now, because actually selling the house was the wrong thing to do. We could have done something else. But it felt like the honourable thing to do. And that's the only regret I've got. Otherwise, if something doesn't work once you jump again, jump somewhere else. Something always turns up. Yeah. I know that sounds like Mr. McCorber, but something always turns up.
No, it does. It does. I'm always going, just go for it. What's he going to lose? What's he going to lose?
There's also a thing about, because I'm really old now, even though I have no truck with the O word, I don't use it, but you get to a certain age and you think, look, I've lost my wife, I've lost all my money, I've lost my daughter, she died as well 20 years ago, my stepdaughter, I've lost so many things, and I'm here, I've survived. Really, there's nothing left to lose. And it's like, my new boyfriend is very handsome. We're going to go and try and conquer Hollywood between us in the new year, because I'm 65. Why not? It might come to nothing, but it'll be fun.
Yeah. Yes. So of all of those losses, so to say, let's not look at them as losses, but those time spent with people and learning and, going through life, was there a point where you sunk down, where you thought, actually, this can't go on, it's too much, if I allow these thoughts to go into me, is there any point continuing, or why?
Well, I've always thought, I've never gone into why me, because I've always thought, well, why not me? Shit happens to everybody. Yeah. And so why not me? And, oh God, I don't want to get religious, but I'm a Buddhist. I've been a Buddhist since 1985. I chant every day. The universe supports me. Stuff comes, really surprising. Like, oh my God, I've got no money. Gons, and I really need money by the end of the week, please. And it comes, a phone call comes. 3 times in my life, it's been like, I've used up all my credit. I've got like 3 weeks to go before I can't pay the mortgage. I can't pay the bills. I need something. And 3 times a cheque for thousands of pounds has arrived completely out of the blue. And it's given me, either saved me or given me enough of I attribute that to chanting and Namyo Renge-kyo and being in tune with the universe, so that what you put out, you get back. And also, because I'm a Buddhist, I have no fear of dying or things going wrong, because I think I'm going to come back anyway. Right. It may be completely foolish, but that's kind of how I function.
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking back over conversations we've had, there seem to be a number of things that can hold people back. One is embarrassment, and that depends who you're worried about. One of the things about look, mum, no hands is, do you do it in front of your mum and make a fool of yourself? So there's a sort of physical fear, perhaps, and a fear of reputational fear, fear of how people will consider you. And then the people that seem to make most progress in life are the ones that don't worry about those things so much. And there's another element to the taking your hands off the bars when you're cycling, which is the Luke Skywalker idea of let the force be with you. Don't grip the controls too tenaciously. You've got to find your way through this maze or whatever he's trying to do.
Yeah, I am a bit controlling, and that I have to keep reminding myself to not let
the force be with you. But your Buddhism, though, must help you with that, mustn't it?
It does, but also I'm also God, so many things. I'm also a recovering addict, and that whole thing of I have no control over places, people, or things, and just for today, I'll just if it gets really bad, I'll just for today I'll do this. Even if I can't do it for the day, I'll do it for the next hour. Yeah. So. And I'm sorry, Leighton.
I was going to ask Leighton.
I have known Shaun for 20 years ish, or 20 years, and sitting next to him and hearing things I've heard before, but things I've never heard before. You're quite remarkable, Shaun. I don't mind saying it for everyone who's listening to this to hear, but I love you very much, and you're very inspiring. And I am the exact opposite of what he's just said about him. I hate what I present, though I try so hard to do it, and incredibly self-conscious, scared, petrified to take my hands off the handlebars for fear of falling off. But I keep on doing it, and I don't know why. All sorts of internal issues, and Shaun touched on some of them, and I do all the wrong things to try and get through life. battled that also. But I still do it, and I think I do it actually. And I now only do this with Shaun when we do it. Create with someone I trust so implicitly, with my vulnerabilities, and that is Shaun. So these moments that we get to put on a show, like we just are doing in Greenwich, and hopefully may do with this next thing, are very unique to me, because I don't want to do it with anybody else, and I'm not ambitious to have 10 shows on in the West End or own all the theatres and all of that. I just like writing with Shaun, which limits my output hugely, but it doesn't mean I don't enjoy doing it. And
well, Leighton, that's interesting, because I think what you just said, if I heard you right, was you're prepared to expose your vulnerabilities to each other.
yeah.
And that allows for a no holds sort of agenda. You can.
I've sent him some absolute terrible stuff, and he can be pretty honest with me, and he'll try, or he'll just say, "You're better than that." Not too often.
Not very often.
In the olden days, I did, because everything you write, you think is the best thing since the last thing.
But he'll also suddenly send me something, and I'll go, "Wow, I had no idea you could write that, like that in that style. I don't know if I can. I don't know how to write a lyric for that kind of song." But we sort of do, don't we? There's a song in the show about the gay porn film script, which is a sort of dramatisation of a celebrated film made by this filmmaker, which all takes
tell you
place
afterwards.
All takes place on a subway in New York. And he wrote this amazing, I don't know what you do, it's sort of electronic rap thing.
Are You As Nervous As I Am is set in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and is very much orchestrated by Matthew Malone beautifully to fit those occasions, and we wrote for that. Shaun wrote lyrics for those times. One's called Happy, Bright and Useful. Happy, Bright and Useful. And, it's perfect. It's of Doris Day and all of that. I'm not allowed to say that, apparently. And then this next show, totally techno. So I was sitting in lockdown. We'd started it before then. Bit of Pet Shop Boys inspiration, because I love them, and they had written a great musical I love called Closer to Heaven. I did take my hands off the handlebars when we approached this, and I said I want to do something I have never done before. So I didn't sit at my upright Yamaha piano. I sat at the computer. So there it is, and the result of that is, well, dare I say,
it's an extraordinary
It's
song.
our best and most interesting
and it's
project.
So aren't you excited now, thinking, if I've
Oh,
gone away from what I've
well, now I'm
normally-"
talking about, as soon as I get onto this one, with nothing but love and respect for the current one, which is quite a traditional musical, this next one, banging the table. I see, I'm getting passionate. Shaun just absolutely rightfully.
We've got all sorts of background noise.
That we wrote that quite quickly too.
We did.
Because it was coming out of us.
And we wrote a song. We said, what about... did you write the... Look at me. Did you write the...
Music first.
Yeah.
But
we had this idea for a song. There was this guy, Peter Jerome, who was a kind of guerrilla gay filmmaker in the 60s and 70s, had a retrospective at the BFI in 2011. And he was the first porn filmmaker to have any kind of presence at the BFI. And I think you had the idea, well, what if one of those people he filmed in the streets of New York?
Black and white, cine film, what were they called?
Street photographers.
Yeah.
Super 8 it filmed on. Came to the BFI and watched this film of him as a young man. Yes. And it's a song about an old guy looking at his 20-year-old self and going, God, I was beautiful, and I had no idea. And he wrote this extraordinarily emotional tune to set it to, and it's all kind of immediately pre-AIDS, so it's all before all that stuff started, and that I've never written a song like that. We haven't written a song like that.
I can't wait for that to exist outside of our Dropbox file.
Does that play to a sort of certain dissatisfaction with digital as opposed to analog? That you need something a little bit more cranky. You need those interference lines and so on. Is that what you mean when you talk about Super 8 street photographers? You're trying to create an image of trying to recreate a world in which things were a bit jerky, a bit sort of
You're
less,
making me
less
think
polished.
of a different thing. If you didn't get it back then, that was it.
Yeah.
So there was something that's lost in modern writing, because you can go back and do 1,000 tracks, 1,000 different takes. So I think writing, I mean, this isn't quite what you're saying, but Peter had to get it.
The film, yeah. Peter Jerome,
So
the filmmaker.
The filmmaker. So he would be there filming and setting up these scenarios and doing it in one take. And then on top of it, it was a sexual experience that he was capturing.
And when he used to go and play them at very fashionable parties in Manhattan, you know, he was friends with Andy Warhol, all that stuff. He would have to play his Super 8 film and press the button on the cassette player to make the recording start at the same time, because you couldn't put Super 8 on, you couldn't put sound on Super 8 at the time. And there's something very charming about that. Yes. So, you know, if as it were, if the music didn't reach the climax at exactly the same moment as the people in the film, something was awry.
Yeah, synchronization.
Yes.
We used to record Top of the Pops on my brother's reel-to-reel tape recorder with a microphone up against the loudspeaker.
I did
and
that.
we all had to be silent during it.
Yeah, I did that.
That was the only way. There was no connections in those days.
And I
There
had
were
all
no
those.
plugins.
And when you got radio cassette players, I had all these tapes with that started like 30 seconds, you know, 10 seconds into the song because you haven't pressed the button fast enough because you didn't know what they were going to play.
Now, look, I may have alighted upon a really important thought for you chaps.
Whoa!
That, yeah, it's to do with comfort zones, and I think Leighton, you are challenging your comfort zones and doing some of your best work when you do. And I'm not so sure, Shaun, whether you've abolished all discomfort zones by your philosophy. And I let me just mention a couple of things. I think this thing about getting older is very true. You do, you know, my wife has said when she reaches 84, she's smoking again. So,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, F the consequences.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a certain amount about that. You know, you've served your time, and now you know, stop listening to all those little naysaying things in your ears.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
but you seem to be quite iconoclastic. I wonder if this gay porn musical, though, is your attempt to find the last sort of barrier to knock down.
Maybe it's
When
not.
you tell me your life story.
This is not going to play at Drury Lane, clearly. This is not a big commercial Disney musical, though I am working hopefully on one of those as well. Comfort zone.
Are there people?
I'm learning what 30-year-olds think, because my boyfriend's 33, and he comes from, he's not British, and he comes from a completely different headspace. So I'm starting to learn what that is, and you know I don't know if that's, I'm 65, so I don't know if that's the generation below me or the generation below that, but their worldview is different, and they have whole loads of areas where people in their late 20s, early 30s are far more fearful than I ever was, and far more concerned about how they appear to other people. Or maybe I was like that then, I don't know. But there are also lots of areas which they take as for granted, and you're going to ask me for an example, which I never took for granted, you know, that kind of, it's like, you know, nobody under 30 would move into a flat that didn't have a phone line, a heating, a washing machine, or a fridge. And you know, those were things I didn't acquire till I got a wife and a house and 2 kids and a dog. You know, you stuck the milk in a bowl of cold water.
Or hung it out the back, the north-facing window.
Exactly.
Or something.
Yeah. So it's I have a terrible fear of missing out, and that's what drives me.
But maybe I can ask the question another way. Without mentioning names, are there people in your industry who just churn out the regular stuff? You know, the next piece of work is going to be very recognisably similar to the previous piece of work, and they have their trademark product, and they can produce it, and it's a commercial success, and blah, blah, blah. And then there are people like you who are angst-ridden, creative.
Do I come across as angst-ridden? I don't think I'm angst-ridden. But I'm eclectic. I'm certainly eclectic.
I'm just provoking you a little bit, but you know what I mean. People who are sort of trying to work it out, trying to break new ground, trying to do new stuff, trying to challenge themselves as well as maybe the format, because as you say, you're maybe taking the musical in places it's never been. Is that a fair distinction to make?
I think if I had hit on a formula that worked and reliably.
What they call a cookie cutter.
If I had hit on a formula that made me lots of money with every show, I would keep on doing them. Trust me, and have the house in the south of France and the private jet and the place in California. But I haven't yet, and I just get interested in stuff. So it's not a conscious decision to be as eclectic as I am, but it's throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks.
How much mud do you throw, Leighton? We were not even touching the mud. It's too messy.
In reference to my creativity?
Life.
Oh,
you throw mud.
Yeah.
You have a go at stuff. You do all sorts of things I wouldn't do.
In life? Yeah, and all sorts of things I shouldn't perhaps have done at certain periods in my 30s, mostly. I'm... It's very strange. My entire career financially has had nothing to do with my artistic output. So I have worked in all sorts of different fields and been successful in my unqualified endeavours. And then musically, because I won't do, and I can't use the expression, I won't do not things very nice for certain kinds of people. Commercial, music I get paid to do for other people's requirements. I've always struggled to do that. What does that mean? So I'm quite reserved in that respect, but in life, I have lived well. As my diabetic nurse said to me, you'll have the memories.
She sounds fun.
She is fun. She's called Sylvia. She's wonderful.
Oh dear. And how was growing up for you?
Oh gosh, I can see how much time we don't have. I'm adopted, so
we're flexible.
All comes back to an extraordinarily amazing piece of luck. I was adopted out of a very unpleasant. You don't get adopted because things are great. You get adopted because you need to not be there no more. And my auntie adopted me from her sister, who was a mess, and I had this amazing. See my older siblings who were not. They tried to foster one more. It just didn't work. I was saved. So I was put in this very safe space. And then completely accidentally and through no fault of their own, that then put me in another precarious situation. It was, growing up was weird and tough. And my lovely parents were not quite my parents. So there was always a tiny bit of confusion in me because I was 4.5, so I knew them. They had brought me up before that. They were amazing,
and they were still around. I'm guessing if they're
and then my mum and dad, adoptive parents, thought it was okay to then continue a relationship with my auntie, who was my mother, but could never not see me as not her son. It was very confusing. So it messed me up for a long time. I was really lucky and very safe, and growing up was weird. It's okay now, I look back at it, but it was, talking to other people and trying to explain your cousins become your brothers and sisters and your brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that happens a lot in African culture as well. Like often you're sent to your aunties or uncles and...
Yes, and it's the right thing.
And you find, don't you, in your teenage year or younger, you find your own family, your found family rather than your birth family. You had Sarah.
Well, then I was I was not doing well. So I gave up my education to write musicals. I used college as a rehearsal room to write my first show with another colleague, a college student, and we did well with that. A lady came to see it. She had just lost her husband in the middle of and I was at college with her daughter. She's called Sarah Broadhurst. She's a remarkable woman.
Amazing.
Super senior in the book trade, of huge esteemed.
Reputation, yeah.
Yeah, so she was the chief critic of the bookseller, so she was the one who told the trade what was going to be. She found Terry Pratchett, she found Collins, and all the big authors was part of her thing. Anyway, she found me, and he picked me up, put me in this flat in London, and looked after me for 10 years. That was how we did the Pratchett show, because she knew Terry. And so I had a third I had the first not great experience. Then my adoptive parents, my mum and dad, 100%. My mum's not with us no more. And then Sarah picked me up at the age of 18. So I found luck. And Shaun, she is my third mother, but, she's not that. She's my dearest friend. And still I'm confused by everything.
It's funny though, isn't it? I mean, as a teenager, I found another family with one of my teachers at school and his wife, who kind of gathered it sounds really creepy in today's standards, but they gathered a group. It was a boys' school. They gathered a group of, 4th, 5th years, lower 6th people who, and, were friends and mentors and taught me all sorts of things outside the curriculum, because my home was full of fighting and arguments and all that. So I was always off doing plays or with friends. I was never home. It's one of those things.
I mean, do you think the turmoil, if that's the right word, of all this is actually helpful to the creative?
Has to be.
Because I think if you have a very perfect upbringing and a huge sense of security in your childhood, you probably just go off and become a banker or something, don't you?
Yeah,
or a doctor.
It would be lovely to know. That one of the things I had to learn when I got married was what a family was like. What a healthy family was like. My wife was a brilliant mother. I'm not sure her daughters would say the same, because she was quite wacky, but she was. And I didn't know how families functioned, how healthy family, because I have 2 brothers, and we were all brought up not to be close, because if we were close, we were loving each other, and we weren't allowed to love each other. All our love had to go to mother. So she played divide and rule until she died, right up until the time she died 20 years ago. And no idea. It was both my brother and I have said it's always the women in our lives who've taught us what a family is.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem to be somewhat a theme that,
Does it?
Yeah, having to resolve childhood stuff and funny enough, even in the stories you're talking about, I mean, I can see some of the elements of Are You As Nervous As I Am, in a way, being worked through.
Yeah.
So maybe your writing and your composing is a
very,
form of resolving some of the things that are
I think that's true. I was commissioned to write a show. Oh, I'm not allowed to say this.
Okay. I'm going to ask Leighton a question. Leighton, can music help you resolve? When you finished a piece of writing, is that the word? Composing, because But anyway, can you think? Does that leave you emotionally thinking?
I can't write if I'm not in the right headspace to do it, and that can be a year out, or 2 years out sometimes. And then that was the longest period where sitting at the piano became incredibly uncomfortable. For I do sit to play for pleasure, and then you're off, and then it will become a composition. It used to be a Sunday morning thing, and then I used to lie in bed with my partner and I'd play for an hour or 2 hours, and then in there would be a new song, and I would remember it. Yes, it gives me huge, immense joy to still play and to write, but if it can also be very painful.
Yeah. Do you ever wonder where it comes from?
Yeah, I do.
What do you think?
There's a terrible joke about Berlin or someone just saying, well, it comes from when I sit at the piano and write songs. But no, it comes from somewhere. Depending on your knowledge, I'm an emotive composer. Looking at Shaun, he's looking out the window. I joke. I know, reflective. We have this great view. We're sitting in this wonderful place, just to say, if you don't know anything, and I'm looking into a shop onto a street. But it looks like a film because of the lighting here.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I'm sort of in a slight daze with that. It's so beautiful. Sorry.
Yeah,
You write your own emotive composer.
Yeah.
Yeah. The emotions of what I'm feeling absolutely come out when I'm sitting at the piano, and that is why I am a composer, I think. I can't sit there and do it by order. It's very important to know why I'm writing something.
So do you think when you pass something that Shaun really gets, that it was because you were in the space?
Yeah, totally.
When you wrote it?
And never more so than the show we've just done, which is the Trouser Bar one, because we were so in tune with that, and we were flowing off of each other, and...
Also, he writes a melody that never quite goes where you expect it to. It's not... Leighton is not easy to set to... Leighton's music are not easy to fit words to, because they have funny odd lines, and they go up when you think they're going to go down, and they have little twirly bits and all the rest of it, and then they won't do what you think they're going to do, and to shape the sentiment of a lyric so that so whoever's singing the lyric starts in one place and finishes in another, emotionally, hopefully with a bit of sort of thinking about it in between. They're always very surprising, and because the music's surprising, I think it helps to make the lyrics
what is the power?
surprising.
I went to see the can't even think now. The Band's Visit.
Oh yes,
night.
I saw that in America.
Yeah, it's on at the Donmar.
Yeah.
And when you unpack it, it's very simple words, but you cry. I mean, what is it about what you guys do that can create such powerful emotions in the audience? What is it that you do?
There's a kind of rule. There's a kind of musical theatre rule that goes, when the emotion gets too big to talk about, you sing.
Right.
And when the emotion gets too big to sing about, you dance.
Right.
And so one transitions into the other and into the next one. I think that writing simple lyrics, which really kind of goes straight to somebody's heart, and you don't need to be clever to understand, is a really, really difficult thing to be, and because you end up having to cut away to get there. There are some people. Tim Rice does it really well. He's a very, very good lyricist. Who gets, but if you look at some of the old classic kind of American songbook songs, there's My Heart Stood Still. It goes, I took one look at you, that's all I had to do, and then my heart stood still. My feet could move and walk, my lips could move and talk, and yet my heart stood still. That's really simple. Anybody can understand that, but emotionally, it's very direct.
And do you know when you've written something that will have impact, or is it like comedy where you have to try it out and see what effect it has on an audience before you know? Or
bit of both, I think.
Yeah, you have an inkling. This current production, there are moments musically I thought might have had bigger impact. Shan't go too deeply into that, but. You don't know.
And there are moments when I sit in the audience and think, oh, Shaun. It's perfectly all right, but really, that was lazy.
Oh.
We actually had a joke about some of the worst lyrics we've ever heard in songs and so forth. Do you ever have stuff that you look back and think, I just wished I'd spent another 5 minutes on that?
My favourite lyric in this show that no longer exists. I get away with an awful lot more because everyone that goes to see a musical can understand the words. I've always known that if you don't write an absolutely dreadful score, composers get away with a lot more than they should. My favourite lyric in this show that we had to change was, I'm so excited, I'm wetting my pants, I'm off on some quest like an ancient romance.
And we've had to change it. Every time I try to put pants in a lyric, they make me change it. I mean, there are famous.
So you use the word trousers in the new one instead. So that's
No, we do something very bland instead. It's like there are terrible, there are famously terrible musicals that you have an affection for. But, even like The Fields of Ambrosia, where everyone knows you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's not good.
No.
But, great Lerner and Lowe in Camelot get away with It's May, the lusty month of May, a time for every frivolous whim, proper or im.
Yeah, what about Hal David? You'll only get pneumonia and then he'll never phone you.
I love that. That's cheeky, though. And there's a great, David Zippel has a great one in City of Angels where he goes, if you're not celibate, we could raise hell a bit. But which doesn't actually rhyme, but it doesn't matter. It's so witty.
You forgive that, I guess.
You forgive that.
So from bad lyrics there's presenting your work to people, and you mentioned that your mum had heard a few songs or the whole songs.
So my mum passed away just before COVID, and so we did know the songs, and I do demos of them. But what were you going to ask?
Would she always get a preview of each show? And
Mummy, I love you, but I got to say this. She told me once, I don't like the sound that a piano makes. And it took me years to understand that she didn't mean me, but I took it as to mean me. And I think I tweeted it because it meant something. And I sang her the song that Shaun and I were talking about. What the hell is it for? And it's a big belter.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And I'm shouting it at her at the said piano that we wrote it on because she came to visit the friend. And she said, well, it'll be nice when someone who can sings it. And I've just poured my heart out. I knew she was not well at the time and knew that she would not probably see a production, which was true. Oh, Mummy, only mummies can be so cruel without meaning to be, or so right unknowingly.
A friend of mine at university who then went on to drama school got his first job at the National Theatre playing bits and extras, extra walk-ons and spear carriers and things back in the day. And he phoned his mum up with great excitement and said, Mum, I'm going to work at the National Theatre. And she said, that's nice, dear. Are there many busy roads to cross?
Or be careful on the escalator.
Yeah, and only mothers can do. My mother had this wonderful phrase where if you hadn't done what she wanted, she said, well, it doesn't matter, it's best that any one of us is disappointed.
So, I think Look Mum No Hands really encapsulates quite a lot of the issues, isn't it? You try to show your mother something,
Yes.
Yes. And I think we all do that. We all want approval and recognition and to please. And, that's we sometimes do crazy things, just to get the attention, even if it's not always the approval, because that's without the attention, that's worst of all, isn't it? Having no attention. So I guess there's something in that. In that little metaphor that we
and maybe we didn't get it from there, which is why we're trying to get it elsewhere. But
I think that sense of looking, trying to resolve stuff, looking for stuff, which feeds directly into the creative instinct. So it's very hard to imagine your life being different when you just change the one variable that you think, it would have been nice if, because you change that and everything changes. And you're not the same person. Maybe you'd have liked The Simple Life with just the cookie cutter musical that you could churn out, or just working for Disney, which seems to be more formulaic. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but somewhat formulaic.
Yeah, but you're being really well paid to write formulaic stuff. It's totally cool.
And so
and also they know what their audience will buy. I mean, and it is, as Stephen Sondheim said to me, it is called show business. It's not called show art. It's show business. It's a business. It's about selling stuff.
Actually, there's something in that. Well, I don't know if we've exhausted you. We don't have any limits to time, so on. But I mean, when you look back on the conversation, has it identified anything in your responses that has surprised you? Perhaps have you?
I could listen to Shaun all day.
I talk too much.
You say you've learned some things from Shaun, which
I have, which
made some
will be reflected, I'm sure, when we sit down and re-engage with the next thing, or the next thing, whatever that might be. It's all quite raw, my life with my mums, because obviously I had two. I had the real one and then the secondary, then the adopted one, and then I think my mum would have loved this show, and that's a real sadness, because it's written for that sort of generation. I think possibly.
Yeah, I think
they would have recognised
take
these
your mums,
stories.
take your grandmas.
It
is for everyone. But carry on as you were saying.
No, I don't think I've begun to mourn the loss of my adoptive mum, my real, the mum that brought me up.
I think grief
maybe
is very a hard thing to...
Grief is a weird thing, and it comes up.
And you never get over it. You just learn to live with it.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
Yeah, it's good to be able to tap into the emotions and let your thoughts go there, and you've got this outlet to, produce wonderful things that can be shared with other people and also give you a sense of relief. Whereas those who don't have that creative outlet just carry it around and don't know how to.
That's true.
How to work with it.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
And also, but they never really go. The dead people never really go. They won't go till I go. They can't talk to me, but I can talk to them.
I think that's right. Even though the mother you're referring to can't see the latest show, you carry her, don't you? And,
you do. They say you die a few times. When you die, the last person that remembers you die. And
yeah,
then,
exactly. But she's still very much alive in you in so many ways.
Yeah, more so than I perhaps realised till 45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I am, because of her, and because of their kindness towards me as a child and giving me keyboard lessons and encouraging me. Absolutely. This is her fault.
And also, it's the weird thing. The show, I said I'm not allowed to talk about this. I can talk about it if I don't name it. There's a show that I was commissioned a few years ago, and it was just after my wife had died. And it's about a real person. It's a bio show, and I couldn't get a handle on it. It's a bio show about a man and his wife and a famous couple. She was very strong, and when you did the research, he was really obsessive compulsive and pernickety and driven, and she was very strong and together and really made his career for him. And I couldn't get a handle on it. I couldn't get a handle on it at all. I couldn't get a handle on him at all until I realised that he came from a controlling mother and an alcoholic father. I came from a controlling mother and an alcoholic father, though I didn't know that at the time. And suddenly, in writing about them, following the facts of their life, I actually realised I was writing about my own marriage, and it was like 18 months after Jenny had died, something like that. And it's a story about a marriage that is also a love story. In fact, I mean, both historically and in fact that it's about me. So you kind of it's what we were talking earlier about hooks.
Yeah.
I was able to get into the story.
Yep.
By hanging all my stuff on his hooks, as it were, and make it a better show. And because actually, if you saw a show about the real guy, you'd think, oh, he's a bit of a creep, which is possibly what people think about me. But I hung those kind of emotional things on there, and I'm never going to identify the show.
Do you think there's a case for, obviously Are You As Nervous as I Am is a brand new musical, and when you've attended it, how many times have you been? A few times?
Too many.
Yeah. But I mean, do you study the audience reaction?
Yeah, that's the problem.
Are you disappointed?
Yeah. Oh, of course, yeah.
Yes, because you think... And do you think, therefore, that, if it's an established musical that everyone knows well, then maybe it doesn't need it. But do you think there might be a case? Funny enough, because we interviewed Simon,
yep.
I think I had a completely different understanding and appreciation
Simon,
of the whole performance than the average person who just wandered in lamely and maybe didn't buy a programme.
Because you spoke to him before you saw it?
Yes,
is that how it worked out? Ah.
And I'm just wondering if there's a case. Maybe people think musicals are superficial. Unlike great works of theatre that you need to read pages of this, and therefore you don't need much help. But I think that the discussion we've been having today and the one with Simon enormously informs what went in. The 8 years, by the way, of collaboration that went into making a 100-minute musical.
Yeah. It's always 7 years.
Do you think? Yeah, all right.
But it's 7 years for a musical. It's just like
it's biblical. It's biblical, yeah. Right? But do you think that there's more need for explanation or reading up and so forth to really get inside the collaborative effort, what you're trying to achieve? Because you're saying that you use apparently simple words and they can have a huge emotional punch, and that's almost the trick of it. Whereas if you go to the theatre, sometimes the the words are much more, the dialogue's much more elaborate and clever and all the rest of it. Do you think, therefore, that there's some misjudgment?
No. I'm learning.
Is there a misjudgment of musicals?
There's a huge misjudgment of musicals because they're seen as being light and trivial. It's partly because it's essentially an American form, not a British form, and the Americans do it better than we do. A good, Stephen Sondheim has every bit as much depth as Chekhov. He writes about the human condition in every bit as much depth and detail and profundity. Lots of, but there are also there are different kinds of musicals, there are different kinds of forms. The musical element and the dance element kick you emotionally in a way that it takes a lot for a play to do. So therefore it can be seen as being glib and easy. And lots of musicals are glib and easy. Lots of plays are glib and easy as well, and really annoying. And I sit there kind of going, this is shit, why am I watching this? But it's a valid art form that it's fashionable to sneer at, I think.
Leighton, you were saying that when you studied the audience reaction, that what did you conclude from that?
It's not a show that you're going to stand up and start. It's not written for standing ovations in the middle of it. This one, it's very much a story that propels you along. And as Shaun mentioned, the device that Simon had was sort of to make the audience of it feel comfortable listening to the songs in their natural position in the world, rather than the magical world of musicals thing. Why am I saying that? So when I watch someone watching it, what I'm actually seeing is people watching a play with music, as Simon described it, and so I'm not seeing the quite the normal musicals reaction. Except last night, it was our bestest audience, and it was every night is different. That is another weird thing. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I hate. Sorry.
No. But actually, last night I stopped watching the audience and I started watching the show again because something was happening that was different to the one I'd watched a few nights before, which is a testament to the show and the say again.
You noticed that through the audience and their reaction, and you thought they're acting differently. So let me see what they're seeing.
I've done shows. I have a talent for sitting behind somebody. I hate sitting in the audience in one of my shows. After dress rehearsal, I never want to see it again because I always sit behind somebody who's having the worst time of their life.
Yeah, that happened to you on Tuesday.
It happened to me on Tuesday, and last week as well. And I've sat in Drury Lane watching a show of mine behind people who are kind of going, "This is terrible,"
That show of his was The Lord of the Rings and was magnificent.
It was great. It was
and
a great
so
show.
ahead of its time.
And all those things. But anyway, besides all that...
You didn't get the audience you deserve always, right?
You don't get the... No, it's political and it's a perception and it's a whole slew of things. But sometimes the audience will pick up on something that you didn't know you'd written, that you didn't know was there, and you'll suddenly look round and people are crying and you think, oh, that's good. Oh, I'll take that. Yeah, that was deliberate.
Yeah, this is a bit like the stand-up trying out their work, isn't it?
It is, exactly.
Until you get the audience reaction, you don't know what's funny or what's this or what's that.
Yeah.
And I think
but we do workshops. We have done presentations, but musicals are ginormous beasts. On that stage are 12 people. Behind that screen at the back of the stage is 6 musicians. Gosh knows how many people. And we have 3 weeks to.
And when we did Lord of the Rings, we had 50 dressers, let alone the cast. We're having a company of about 75 with 50 dressers, and that's a lot of money.
When you go to the live streaming of opera and stuff at the cinema, you do get a lot of chat before it starts. A lot of help. So I'm just sort of coming back in my little, thing here about whether people might benefit from having a bit of a chat.
It's like going to see Shakespeare, though, isn't it? It's better if you know. Shakespeare's better if you know what's coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
learned that the hard way.
I've ruined Hansel and Gretel for so many people by telling them it's all about oral greed and food anxiety. And then they see it in a completely different way. Well, look, chaps, I mean, I think we could carry on talking forever, but, what we've covered a huge range, and you've been incredibly honest and open in ways that we hadn't expected, really.
Oh, thank you.
And I think it's hopefully given anyone who listens to this a huge insight into what goes on in the creative process and the drivers behind that and the fears and joy perhaps of the whole exercise.
And anybody who's listening, we've probably revealed the fact that actually we have no idea what we're doing most of the time. And it's all blind luck and a bit of skill thrown in, a bit of craft.
You've got each other to get yourselves through it and
we have.
Create beautiful work.
We have.
Yeah. Really.
Thank you both for having
Thank you very
us.
much.
Great.
We've enjoyed it thoroughly.
As you
Thank
say,
you so much.
one last thing from me before. As you said, there's no formula, or else you'd have it. But I think you guys have found your formula, especially you, Leighton. You've got one and you're holding on to it. And
It's called Shaun McKenna.
And when things work so beautifully, you do cherish those in life and appreciate them, and try not to let them go.
I think that's true.
Right, thank you very much, everyone. Until next time, Daniel, Leighton, Shaun, listeners, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't miss future episodes of
Look, Mum, no hands.
Share and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a 5-star review on Apple.
If you are inspired to take that leap and join us on the show and share your experiences or have a friend who might, message us on Instagram
at Look Mum No Hands Podcast. This has been a Talks with My Neighbour Productions, produced and hosted by Sarah Sharman and Daniel Confino. Music by George Twidell, artwork by Jane Confino, and title voiceover by Joshua Sharman.